I'm hoping everyone can hear me and can see the screen. Good morning. I'm hoping everyone can hear me and can see the screen. Good morning. Sorry for that duplicate sound. If we can, oh, good, thank you. Good morning, Sandy. Thank you for the confirmation. Good morning, Jeanette. I'm so glad you can hear and see. So this is going to be a lot of fun. We're going to try and build an app together. Good morning, Marcel. So glad to have you all on board. Now, I do want to start. I don't know where all of you are in the world. Feel free to let me know. But I do want to say that I have my prayers with everyone who may be in Cincinnati, who may be aware of the shootings there yesterday. That is a very sad situation, and I think about the amount of shootings that are going on in the U.S. and and actually worldwide, and it's just frightening. But my heart goes out to anyone who may have been impacted or may have family impacted by what happened and those shootings. So under that kind of a sad note, I do want to start our session today by kind of talking about our time. So, as you noted, I set this up for 2 hours. I have not done a Google Hangout for 2 hours before. And so it is possible we don't get that 2 hours amount of time, but I think we can actually complete this work in just 1 hour. I've tried to do as little as possible so that we can work together. And then I want to give you a lot of tips. Now, if there's anybody in the chat right now that is currently an ISV or a service provider that offers Power Apps as a service, can you alert me in the chat, please? I'd love to know that you are either a Microsoft partner or an ISV or someone who basically kind of helps companies implement Power Apps. Some of the tips I have today are specially for you. And it goes back to back before I joined Microsoft. I actually was a service provider and I went into businesses and I helped them implement Power BI, Power Apps, and Flow. And what was interesting is that I was able to do that and to monetize that before the product actually went globally available. So there are a lot of tips, as the product grows, this is still a new product. So we're growing rapidly every week. But, there's things we want to keep in mind as we build production apps. And I'm going to try and bring that out today, kind of share some of my favorite tips. I will share 10 of my favorite tips with you today. As a result of this presentation, I'd also love to see if you do anything that maybe that differently, or if you build an app as a result of this session. I'd love it if you could post it in the Power Apps app gallery. And you'll find that at powerapps.microsoft.com, and then go into the community from the Learn menu, and you'll see the community app gallery. You can add apps, you can add screenshots of apps, and you can even add videos of apps that you've done before. Let's showcase all of the wonderful things that you do. Okay, so without further ado, and there was only like 1 or 2 of you that said you were service providers. So without further ado, I'm going to get started. So let's go to the next slide and talk about my top 10. I'm going to summarize and then we're going to get to do it together. These are by far my top 10 recommendations for anyone building Power Apps, especially if they're thinking about doing that in a production environment. Number 1, most important recommendation that I can give you from personal experience is to obsess about the users. And what I mean by that is sometimes, maybe we have experience in giving business solutions, and we tend to kind of focus on that high level goal, or maybe the executive goal, or maybe the goals that surround the company's business targets or revenue targets. When you're building apps with Power Apps, you want to build with a focus on the people who will be using the app. And yes, you can keep in mind all those other important factors, but as you decide what screens you will have, what things you will use to build your app, you want to do that with the user in mind. What story do they have? What problems did they have? What wish list did they have, right? And so when you think about those things, that's how you plan what your app will look like, what it will do, how easy things are to do or how hard things are to do, are all wrapped around who's using the app. And I suggest, you write this on your computer screen, just like a little Post-it. It's the user that matters. It's all about the user. It's not about the wonderful features that Power Apps has. It's not about how competent we are as technical or non-technical people. It's about the person using the app. Every decision we make focuses around that. Okay? I can't stress that anymore. Number 2, I suggest that you draft up at least 5 hypotheses for success. So what this means is, now that you understand your user, you know what their story is, you know what their problems are, and you know what they'd really like to be able to do, then draft up 5 statements of what you think would mean success for this app, right? So if you're making an app for a medical doctor and maybe his wish and dream is to be able to check in patients faster, perhaps your first hypothesis might be, we assume that if we offer a tablet-based application for the receptionist, we will be able to speed up the check-in process by 20 to 30%. Whatever it is that you'd like to say, but you want to put together like a hypothesis of, after this app gets done, we assume this will be the measure of success. And then don't count on yourself. Like, no matter how much experience you have, don't count on yourself to finalize that list of hypotheses. Share them. Share them with the users. Share them with your peers. Share them with other people to see if they can give you feedback to make that list better. Thirdly, build with forward thinking to analytics. So today, you might just have 2 people using that app and they might use it once a month, right? So the scale is very small. But you want to think about long term, right? How do we optimize our ability to get insights from the data we collect? In fact, very often Power Apps is an intake tool. So when we're intaking data, we want to be able to convert it to insights. And that means we need to think about that when we're looking at our data structure, for instance. Maybe we want to use choice lists, or we want to use drop downs as opposed to letting people type whatever they want. Because if you ask me what my favorite product is, I might type Power Apps with a capital P and a capital A. Somebody else might type PA. Somebody else might type apps. And so when I go do analytics, I won't be able to drill down by Power Apps because everybody's typed it differently. So think about that as you're, structuring your data. Fourthly, sketch. Sketch. Now, I actually do this with paper and pen, and I do it using a notebook called White Lines, which is a notebook that has white lines on it, so that when I draw the sketch, I was going to try and show you how to do it, but I couldn't figure out how. But I can definitely give you a link to how this works. But you draw on the piece of paper, and then you take a picture with an app, and it takes all the lines away. And now you have a digital version that you can share with people. The beautiful thing about sketching without technology is you're thinking about the experience goals. You're not thinking about what you can do with Power Apps. You're not thinking about, like some people might want to use an advanced sketching technology, which is fine if you know it really well. But if you don't know the technology that you're using to sketch, you're now distracted by the how to finish the sketch. The point of sketching is to free yourself from technical boundaries and to focus on experience. And I find that I'm most free in paper and pen. And I love to use the white line tablets because they give me an app that enables me to digitize it. But if you don't use white lines, we also have an app called Office Lens by Microsoft, Office Lens will take any drawing or whiteboard sketch that you do and save it to your OneDrive in OCR fashion so that you can search it, you know. So we have lots of technology to help us get that sketch into a digital place after we make it. But I kind of really recommend you sketch free of technology so that you're not distracted by technology. Number 5, validate your sketch with a couple of people that qualify as end users. So a lot of times I notice that all of these are lessons learned, so I've done them myself. I'll go to my friend who also builds solutions for customers and I'll say, what do you think of this sketch? Now, she's a very technically minded person. She builds solutions every day. She's going to look at it and go, awesome, Audrie, not a problem at all. Because she doesn't do that work. That's not what she does for a living, what I'm making this app to do. But if I were to show that app to maybe a person who's going to be in the tunnel making notes about the frack out at the construction site, they would point out things that I don't even ever thought about. They'll say, wow, it would be really great if I had a way to record the frack out number. Maybe I didn't even know the frack out number existed. You understand what I'm saying? So you want to try to find someone who qualifies as an end user and validate your sketch, not your proof of concept, your sketch with them. So you're making sure, and I have seen people actually use their finger to tap on sketches. So very often I'll take an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, and each 8.5 by 11 piece of paper is a single screen. I will sketch it out. It will have buttons. It will have wiggly lines. It will have whatever I think I want it to do. And then I'll put it in front of that person that qualifies, and no, I will not explain to them how it works. No, I will not explain how it works. I will say, how do you think you might use this to help you get your X job done? And I'm pulling that from my hypotheses, right, that I've already validated that I know are true. So then that person looks at the paper and says, well, I think I would press this button to create a new report, okay? But then when they get to that next page, because I have a page for each screen, the page that goes to the report, then they say, well, I don't see how I pick the contractor. I'm not going to say it's over here under this icon. I'm going to say, where do you think it should be? So as I ask questions to the person who's looking at this sketch, neither one of us are thinking about technology. We're both thinking about usage. Next, after we've validated our sketch, at this point, and not before number 5, is where you can really decide what is going to be your tool and what is going to be your data sources, right? So you might even decide, and I know I'm on the Power Apps team, and I'm the biggest fan probably on this planet of Power Apps, but it's not for everything. So I might get to the end of number 5 and decide, oh, Power Apps is not the right thing for this project. We need something else. But I can make that decision because I'm well educated at that point. But if I've decided that Power Apps is the right tool or a good tool to use, I might go on with number 6, where I'll start to evaluate which data sources are best for this application. And I will think mostly of 2 things. I will think of security, because as we know, right, some data sources don't support column level security. So if we need to hide column A and column B from users so it's impossible for them to see column A or column B, certain data sources do not meet that requirement. So I need to pick a data source that meets that requirement. And if I'm going to have 20,000 records in the next, 6 months, then I need to think about how I'm going to scale this. Maybe each of my construction sites might have a list that are controlling their intake so that each of those lists don't extend beyond 2,500 or 2,000 records or something like that. I might start to scale and regionalize this so that it's across different environments. So I'm thinking of scalability. I'm thinking of security. I'm also opening up myself to opportunities for data mashups. So are people constantly, when they're trying to do this particular thing, do they often have to log into something else to get some information? And so they log in over there and then they fill out their thing and then they log in somewhere else and they go copy and paste from there. if I see that kind of thing going on, then there's an opportunity for data mashups where I can expose the data that they would log into in addition to this app in the app, so that they'll have one place to go to see that information and act on it. So all of that is being thought about during number 6, which can happen in parallel to me creating a quick proof of concept. Now, my quick proof of concept is more about me checking feasibility. So as you know, like I said before, I was kind of selling Power Apps before it went GA. So I didn't know what I was going to run into. Like, I could only hope I wouldn't run into a problem, but I wasn't sure, you know, because at that time documentation wasn't what it is today, which still needs some help. And, you know, I couldn't definitely be sure that my expectation is what the Power Apps team actually did. So I would do a quick POC. I didn't care what it looked like. I didn't care where the controls were sitting on the screen. Just a quick POC to make sure that the things that needed to happen, the submissions, the access to data, the conditional formatting, the data validation, that was all feasible in the current state of Power Apps, right? So I would do that quick POC on my own, kind of at my desk. And, you know, that's how I would make sure. And usually, I'm going to tell you the truth, I would never spend more than 4 to 8 hours on a quick POC. Quick means less than a day, right? I am just purely checking feasibility. So I want to stress there, this is not a customer thing. However, I can still hold on to that POC. This is what I love about Power Apps, no cliffs. I can hold on to that POC and it can be the beginning of my app, right? In parallel to that, it might happen that day, but I like to separate my design package from my functional. So I would basically spend a few hours collecting icons. Maybe I'll make sure I'm collecting royalty-free icons, or sometimes I like to, as an ISV, I like to ask the customer that I'm working for, maybe the client I'm working for, do they have a branding guide? Do they have media that they have already approved? Because if they do, that just goes into a folder that I can use for my app if I decide I want to refine it with some media. And I'm very sparse on that for my first iteration, unless it actually clarifies something big within the app. And then number 9, I go ahead and finish my POC. This will be the POC that I will show to the client, right? And all of this work normally would take me between 2 and 4 weeks, even when we were pre-GA, right? So most of my Power Apps could be completed within a week. A portion of them would require up to 4 weeks, not because the build took that long, but because it would take that long to get the hypotheses validated, to get a clear picture of the story, of the problems, and the wish list. And here's where I'll tell you, this is why I didn't spend a lot of time building the app, because I invested time in number 1 and number 2. And very often I would ask my customers to include this time in my statements of work so that they would know, okay, Audrie needs us to be involved in this build, right? We can't walk away and wait for her to show us something at the end of a week. We need to be involved in this. And so setting an expectation that others need to be involved in the build really saves time later. Because if you head down a road and then the situation is misunderstood, Power Apps makes it easy to roll back and to like start over even. But it's much easier if you get your story straight before you start. And that doesn't have to take a lot of time, as you'll see today. Okay. And then finally, one of the things I really love to do is I create a feedback log, especially for SharePoint people, you know, because they already know SharePoint, they're using that environment. So it's very easy for me to create a feedback log, which is simply a list that I give everybody access to. And everybody is a subset of the final users. So I do run my POC through a subset of beta testers, like maybe 1 or 2 people that qualify as end users. And I will let them go on that app for maybe a day or 2, even 3, depending on their time availability, and let them log the let them log their feedback in the SharePoint list. So really love that capability, because what the feedback log does for me is it also gives me a checklist of what has been asked or what has been encountered. And I can use that checklist as I'm running through all the things I'm going to do. So everyone's been quiet. I just want to make sure you are hearing me, that I'm making sense and you don't have any questions. And then we're kind of going to go start it looking at how this would work in real life. So give me a little validation that this so far, you're hearing me well, and this is making sense to you, and then I'll move on. Okay, awesome. Thank you, Sandy. You know, because I worried, did they lose the sound? Okay, everybody got quiet on me. Usually it's a lot of people chatting. Thank you, Ellie, as well, and Stacy. Okay, so let's roll, all right? Let's get the story first. Remember I said this is like the #1 priority in this thing, is that we have a story. Now, all the way through this demo and everything we're going to do, all of the data here is completely fictitious in every way. So any names you might recognize are purely just for fun. So please don't initiate any campaigns against me for using something that you recognize. We're just going to have a little bit of fun with this today. So I'd like you to imagine that your manager walks into your office and announces that her leadership wants your team to manage the second targeted giving campaign for your organization. Woo. So somebody above your manager says, we need to handle the giving campaign for our org. And this is only the second time they've done this, right? And so here's exactly what that manager said. Last year, we had people working with clipboards and paper forms to collect donations. It went really well, and all the employees were motivated to try and get the most donation. However, some of the papers were lost or illegible, and we had trouble keeping account of how close we were to each target, since people didn't submit the forms in a timely manner. You mentioned that you think Power Apps is a good tool for building solutions. Would you be willing to prove that out by taking on this project? Oh, and by the way, we need all the work done by next Friday. So those of you that were paying attention, thank you, Sandy, to this scenario, let's see if you caught some very important things in this story. Thing #1 that I noticed is that people have been working with paper last year. So they were running around with clipboards. Now, I asked a question about this and found out that they were actually meeting with celebrities, popular people in the world, and they got audience with these celebrities at different locations, corporate buildings, and they just needed to have the clipboards and the paper to make notes on what those people agreed to donate. And so they would just write it on the form that so-and-so is donating so much money. And then they would go to the next person and they would keep doing that. And then they would turn those papers in at some point and, you know, get them recorded. All right. Next thing I pulled out of here is that the employees were motivated to try and get the most donations. So there was some type of competition going on here, that as they talked to different people, they needed to try and get the most donations, right? So they kind of want to keep track of, you know, where they are and how much they've gotten in and so forth, right? Next, paper was lost or illegible. And what that means is they actually lost donations because nobody followed up with the person that was given the donation. That's a real business impact, right? I said, oh, we gotta, that's a low-hanging fruit for us too, right? Because we're not gonna lose the Power App data, right? So right away, I feel like, oh, I got a win here, right? I'm gonna keep going. They said they had trouble keeping account of how close they were to each target. So I'm thinking to myself, whatever solution we use, we've got to keep track of how close we are to the donation target. So I asked the question, what do you mean by target? And the manager said to me that a target is that each charity, they picked like 5 or 6 charities, and each one we had a target of what we wanted to donate, because we've communicated with those charities and we've offered to contribute X amount. So the campaign for each target is to reach, for each charity is to reach the target. Thought that was interesting. Great. Took mental note of that. Next, people didn't submit the forms in a timely manner. So the fact that they were using paper and they had to turn it in at some point meant that there was a delay between the time they got this negotiated and the time they turned it in. Now, this delay can actually represent a loss of funding, especially if the celebrity forgets what they say before the document's signed or before the process is followed. So here's an opportunity for me to show how my solution can help save money or even maybe reduce litigation. So I'm looking at all these low-hanging fruits with lots of opportunities to succeed here. Next, this one was the one that was probably the most frightening to me. Even though her leadership wants this done for the org, this whole thing has to be ready by Friday. And so I respectively asked, would it be okay if we have a proof of concept that can be beta tested on Friday? And then based on the feedback we get from our customers, we can plan the release of the actual production app. Do you think that would be reasonable? And of course, she said, sure. That does sound reasonable. It does kind of seem crazy that we would release something to everybody in only a week. So thank goodness I had a reasonable person that I was talking to. And most of the time I noticed that when you notice red flags like that, if you respectfully call them out before they become an issue, people tend to adjust without an issue. The other thing is, you know, the whole idea of out of scope is a nasty terminology that you don't want to have to use. So setting expectations early will prevent you from ever having to use those words because they can be eaten very negatively. So don't forget to ask questions, right? So you need to know this story. You need to be able to be one of the people that's collecting donations. That's kind of understand what the problem is and what the goals are. I might have asked, how many contributions did we get last year? This kind of gives me a level set, right? I can now determine, you know, what kind of capacity planning I might need for my database. May I see the data from last year? Me being able to see the data gives me a good idea of what my limitations are. For instance, maybe there's a maximum donation amount allowed for government officials and things like that. So just being able to see the data kind of gives me another opportunity to ask questions as well. And how many people do we expect to participate is also a good question, especially in the scope of situations, not like this one, but in situations where people are editing data. Because like if all of them are editing data at the same time, probably wouldn't choose certain data sources for that because they're not sustainable. I might be nervous about offline access if they're going to be concurrently editing because of conflict resolution. So I want a good idea of how many people are using it, and then are they likely to be editing the same lines of data? In this case, the answers that I got was last year we got approximately 300 contributions. Okay, no worries with just about any data source. May I see the data from last year? It returned up that I didn't see anything complicated. I found out there was no need for code or anything. All the data was just basically sponsor name and the amount they donated, and then we rolled it up against the target, right? And they did have the data because all of the paper was typed into Excel, so they were able to share that data with me. How many people do we expect to participate? She said normally, you know, again, we get about 300 contributions, but the employee base that participates can be up to like 2,000 people participating. So we decided that we would make this data available to the entire org. And so that's how we got to know the story. And I'm just going to stress it one more time, guys, while I have time. This is the most important part of building your app. There is nothing more important than this step. So now we're going to build the hypotheses, right? Now that we understand what our users are doing, we're going to make a hypothesis based on those points that we pulled out. And here's a great example of what I mean by hypotheses, right? So number one, I assume that by implementing a modern digital approach to recording campaign results, we will reduce the number of donation agreements lost. Okay, so that is just basically, I assume that if we stop using paper and we use something else, so that we can capture this in, in the cloud or in a data system, then we'll have less agreements lost, which kind of it's almost guaranteed to succeed, because the loss that can occur is, I lost my internet connection, or I lost my connection to the data or something, but I'm not actually going to lose my agreements, especially if I enable that to be saved to the device. Secondly, if employees can take a secure but bring your own device approach, this will enable them as they campaign for donations, whether they're at work or in the field. So my assumption here was that the clipboards and the paper gave them agility as far as where they were and at what time, and how easy it was to write things down or to record things. So what if we could give them a secure, bring your own device approach that would enable them to do the same thing, right? So we can do that, and it should make it a little bit easier for them than having to carry around clipboards and papers, which can be cumbersome. And if it rains, like it does here in Seattle, it's like most of their papers are just going to get washed out. So number three, we will increase success rates if employees can see a visible running count of donations by cause. Again, this is another assumption, right? If these employees can see how close we are to the targets, it'll provoke them to pick the right cause to work for, and also help them to see, what they need to do next, right? So it's kind of like raises an ability to know what to do with what you're looking at, right? Number four, if we provide a dependable way to submit donations, employees will be less likely to let the ball drop, okay? So if they don't have to remember to put the paper on somebody's desk, then they're more, as they're taking it, it's submitted, then there won't be any ball dropping going on. Kind of will reduce stress as well. So when we think about business solutions, the reduction of stress is almost just as important as the ability to increase the revenue as a result, So when you reduce stress, you help to retain those participants. 5, if we monitor the activities by connecting a dashboard to the data, we will learn new insights regarding engagement for each of the charities and causes we have selected. So here's where we get to test our assumptions on the charities or the causes that we have decided to support. So if we start to connect some type of analytical tool, I bet you can guess which one I might be thinking of. If we connect that analytical tool to the data, now we can learn about, how easy it is to get donations for that, what types of personas like to give to that, and maybe that'll enable us to be better selectors of causes and participants next time. So a very important step, and you want to share this with as many people as you can. This can be something very rapid. It could even be an email, but I would ask for people, please give me feedback. Do you agree with these assumptions? Would you like to take one away and replace one with something else? Try to keep these hypotheses not too long. Don't make a long 10-page book because that's not going to work for an MVP. So remember, we iterate, right? Power Apps is a great tool for iterating. You get that first release out there of what you can solve, and you make sure you solve some problems. And I've got 5 on this screen that I know I can solve, right? But I don't want to put 100 on here. I want to help the customer to understand that we will iterate. After we've achieved these, we'll be able to achieve others, right? And so this will be a checklist at the end of the program. Okay, so let's do it. Everybody caught up? Anybody have questions on the story or the hypotheses? If not, I will keep my eye down there for the next couple of minutes. But once I get started, it's going to be hard for me to watch the chat. So just go ahead and plug them in, and then at the end, or at certain, I'll actually pick certain stopping points. I'll go and check the chat. But it's really hard to watch them both at the same time. Okay? So let's get started. Now, there are a lot of notes in this deck that I've put in here for you so that you don't have to do a lot of thinking right now. But, okay, I'm going to try to get to the browser. You may want to, in certain cases, pull out your own computers here and get involved. Okay? All right, so I did start by putting some data in SharePoint, and I chose SharePoint. I chose SharePoint for a lot of reasons based on those hypotheses, one of which was that the org, everybody used SharePoint. It was a common place where people went. I didn't have to train them on SharePoint. I didn't even have to give them special access because they were able to give me a site where this could be done that already had the permissions for me. So basically, I just had to make sure that I built my app against that site. So, and also at looking at the capacity and looking at the different requirements, I felt like, okay, we can handle this. I said to myself, I think it requires a parent-child relationship. What I mean by that is I have a list called Giving Donations with all of the targets. Maybe I should have called this Giving Targets, but this is the total amount that we intend to collect for everybody. And just for fun, I added my couch here because I need a new couch, guys. So we're going to have some people donate for my couch as well. I don't think my boss cares. So after I did that, notice that I've exposed the ID column, right? So if I edit this current view over here, those of you that might be new with SharePoint, you can also use our new modern experience features. I'm an old school SharePoint person, and so I'm still kind of using old methods of doing things. I'm trying to get caught up. But I wanted to add the ID column, right? This is the column that identifies each record. It's a unique identifier. And as you can see, I've actually purposely added and deleted items from this list to show you that unique identifiers on SharePoint, which are built in for you, they do not allow repetition. They cannot be duplicated. So if you delete an ID from a SharePoint list, that ID is gone. It cannot be reused in that list. So I love that because it always helps me have a way to reference like an item on SharePoint and be 100% sure it's the right record, right? So I surfaced it as well. Now, as far as the contributions that people will be doing, this is the employee contributions. I actually have a list that I've kind of pre-populated with some data. Let's just edit this view. And what I'll do is I'll edit it until it has exactly what I need in it. Now, a lot of people will start building apps against empty lists, or they might use a list that has very little data in it. The danger in that is as you're building your app, you can't see. You're kind of building blind, right? So when I'm looking at a gallery, if that gallery has no causes in it, how do I know that the cause will fit in the space? If it has no contribution amounts, how will I remember to format that as a dollar or currency, right? So try to put some sample data in. You can do something similar to what I did, just put some fake data in there. But you need some kind of data in there so that you can validate that your look and feel is good. You can go to Microsoft Demos or demos.microsoft.com, create a demo environment, and then use the demo data that's in there. Or you can go to, like, there's a lot of different services that will give you free data. You don't even have to do what I did, which is kind of just use celebrities that I know of, and it's irrelevant. It's just for fun. But maybe when you're working with your customer, you'll choose some real sample data that's safe, right? But you need some data. I would not suggest you ever start building an app in an empty list. It's very hard to plan your app that way. All right, so now I'm going to actually somewhat build this from scratch. But here's where I talk about, let me just go through the data so that you can see how each list is built. So the giving donations list, if I go into the list settings, the most important columns here are the title, which is just the default title that comes with SharePoint. Sorry, I can do it this way. The title. And so I just put in some interesting charities. And then I set an amount for each charity. This is my target amount. Now, I will double check sometime in my list. I will show you a big tip I like to give new SharePoint users. Sometimes if you build the columns from the modern experience, right, you might get a different name than what you typed. So to check the internal name, what we call the backend name of a field, you can always open up the column and look at the end of the URL. You'll see something that's called field equals amount. Of course, this is specific to to SharePoint, but it's a good way to check that your names that you see in Power Apps are the same as the names that are on SharePoint. We also added a new feature that I'll show you in a couple of minutes. Well, I'll show you before the end of this video that enables you to use the friendly names in your Power Apps formulas instead of having to use the internal names. I don't know if you noticed that that's an experimental feature. All right, so that's the giving donations. Now, really important to that is my employee contributions. That one has a lookup column. So I'm just going to go into the list settings here. And you'll notice there's a lookup column called cause. And so what this is doing is enabling them to select a cause based on the title from the giving donations list. So it's looking up to the giving donations list for the title, and it includes not only the title, but also the ID. Now, in this case, I checked ID, but you don't have to check ID. The only reason you would check ID like I did is if you want to be able to put it in the list view, which I did. I wanted to put it in the list view. But whether you put it in the list view or not, the cause field, because it's a lookup, contains two things: an ID, that is the ID from the parent list or the ID of the actual giving donation, and the value or the title field of that giving donation. So this is going to be really important to us as we want to show like parent-child relationships in our list. Okay, so that's the SharePoint story. Everybody feel good about this SharePoint story? Somebody say yes or no if you disagree, and then we'll move on. I want to make sure that nobody gets lost along the way. And I'm looking at time, and we're doing good on time. I'm hoping that Google doesn't shut me off. All right. So now we're going to go to Power Apps. We have figured out our story. We have written our hypotheses. From that, we were able to determine our data source. We were also able to refine that data source. Now, in some cases, it exists already, right? But in this case, we were able to refine our data source and make sure it's set up in SharePoint first. Put some sample data in there to make it easy for us to see stuff and make changes. And once we had all that kind of done, now we're going to build our app. Now, I'm going to assume, which is the case, I've already kind of done the quick POC. So we're going to do the quick POC and the app at the same time, just so that we make our deadline. But what I would be testing in my quick POC, I'm waiting for something to appear at the top here. What I'm hoping to test in my quick POC is that all my assumptions about being able to show the child items, being able to submit to the donations list and all of that, I'm checking all of that when I'm doing my quick POC, and I'm not caring about what it looks like, right? So I'm going to go ahead and start from SharePoint. Now, when you start from SharePoint, and I could start from scratch, I could start from an app from data, and I'm so glad you love SharePoint Beat. But sometimes I'll start from SharePoint because it does a lot of work for me. But I will start from the list that I'm submitting to. So in this case, we've got two lists going on. The list about the targets is really just for visibility. Only admins ever edit that list, and they don't need an app to do that. They can keep editing it on SharePoint, right? But the people who will be using our app will be submitting to the contribution list. So that's where I'm going to build from, where their primary submission is. Now, they could have multiple submissions, right? We might be submitting to another data source as well, but I'll start with where we're primarily submitting to. And in this case, I'm actually going to do an app because I told you guys I was going to do app, right? Here's what I name it, right? And however, I will say, I'm just going to put this in there as a, in parentheses, the name and the icon truly matter to me all the time. The name and the icon. So think about your names, because both the name and the icon facilitate discovery and can improve adoption. When you ignore those or take them lightly, you might reduce the ability for people to discover the app and or their ability to understand what it's for. I should have said that while this was creating. So it is now going to go, and this is what I mean why sometimes I love to start from SharePoint, because Power Apps does a lot of work for me. It's going to build what we call that basic 3-screen approach to applications. We're going to get the standard list screen, which will be where people can kind of like select which item they want to use. We'll also get a detail screen so that when they select something, they can see the details about it. And then we'll get an edit screen so that if they realize that the details are wrong, they'll be able to edit that. Now, we're not going to use this app in that way. I actually made a sketch of this app, which I had a little problem showing you. But hold on, let me see if I can pull up the sketch real quick so you can see it while that's building. I meant to call up that sketch a little earlier. Okay, let me just get it on the screen. Let's see, where can I get that stretch for? So Google Hangout got kind of funny when I changed to my image software. So because I don't want to make a mistake and possibly lose you, I'm going to do this sketch right here so you can see it. I actually did it on paper and pen, like I said, but I'm worried that Google Hangout might lose you. So I'm going to do it here. So basically what I sketched out, and you can see that you can sketch this in PowerPoint as well, is a 2-screen app. Okay. On my first screen of the app, I want to give them, so let's do another shape. I want to give them okay, I'm just going to refresh this because I don't see that you guys can see. I'm worried you can't see. Okay, you can see. Okay, so I'm going to give them 2 things. I'm going to give them a couple of galleries. So these are the screens. Inside the screens, I'm going to put some stuff, right? So for the screen here, I'm just going to put a gallery down here. I also want to put like a search bar. So I might remind myself, by the way, I love showing people about the icons in PowerPoint. You have them in PowerPoint. You also have them in Outlook. Yeah, I might be having some slowness going on. Usually PowerPoint pops up right away. Okay, so you can use all of these icons in your apps. You just basically get them the color you want and then right click on them and say save as picture, and you can use them as media in your app. Okay, so I'm just going to put a little search icon up here. We have that in Power Apps, so I don't really need to make that. It already is there, and that's great news. And then I'll have a little box here where I can put my where you can type something that you want to search for, right? And then the other thing down here is I want to show a couple of things. So every gallery has a template row, right? Which kind of represents the row that's repeated all the way down. In this case, I want my template row to kind of help with this hypothesis. I want it to have a few things on it, right? And maybe, let's see, let's make it lighter than that. Let's do like that. And then I might insert over here, I'm going to do a couple of text boxes here. I want the title of the cause, right there. And it doesn't have to be right there, but it's kind of like my way of saying, where do I want that to be? I want it to be, at the top. I also want under it, I want the target. So I want that target amount, right? So that they can see the amount. And I want that formatted in currency so they can tell its currency. And I want that on each of my templates of my gallery, right? Then I would like a way for them to like click on something. And, again, in your sketch, it doesn't have to be the something. It could just be an indication of click here, right? And this is where I'm going to add the donation, right? So they're going to click this plus sign. And I do have a padding issue. So let's see, format, shape. And I'm going to just remove all the padding on this so that you can see the plus sign. And again, I don't think I would use PowerPoint for this reason. I'm thinking about where stuff is and how to make a plus sign. It's a waste of my time. I could paper and pencil this, So this particular button or thing is going to be where they can add a new donation. Now, when they click that, right, it'll take them to another screen. And that screen will have a form on it. And this is where we'll put the sponsor. And I got some white text there. So let's put some black text in here. Sorry, let's just SPONSER. So this is where I'll put my sponsor. So this is the person that's decided to give the donation. Then down here, I want to put the donation amount. Okay. And then I just want another little button. I think we do have buttons in here somewhere, but I'm just going to use this thing over here, which is what they'll press to submit. Now, again, I'm not worried about this being beautiful. I'm trying to get an idea of how this will flow. All right. Now, what I would like to happen underneath the submit is I would like them to immediately see the new donation. So I might add underneath, I get this one, underneath here, I'm going to add a table, right? So here will be insert table or gallery showing existing donations for this cause. Okay, and so I don't need to draw a table. It's just that's going to be a table showing the donation. Now, in some cases, depending on how the kind of people that I'm going to be showing my sketch to, I might actually draw out a table and put a couple of people's names in the left column, put a couple of people. So I might do insert table and size that table because it's not that hard. So again, depending on who is doing your validation, you want it to be clearer or less clear, right? Sponsor, amount, and then I might put a name here, and then, right? So after they press submit, and then as I was looking at this sketch, and this is what will happen, I realized, you know what else would be cool is what if they could see up here somewhere between these two things, the total, sorry, the remaining to be collected. And so I'm just going to do like that. Let's just make this bigger. So blank 5. So it's 50,000. So that would be, okay, help me with my math. 49,500 remaining. So they could see when they start plugging these numbers in how close they are to the target from the page that they just submitted, right? I might also make sure they're in context. So help your users to stay in context of what's going on by creating dynamic scenarios. So like up here at the top here in our header area. So let's put another box there. In our header area up here, we might put the cause name. So we can use a dynamic formula in Power Apps to reference the title of what they selected so that they don't forget while they're working in the screen what they got, you know, what they were working on. I might even have another type of header over here that says causes or select a cause, something like that, right? And so now I've kind of got a clean sketch. So of course these would repeat, right? This would repeat for the entire gallery, and they would just pick a cause and then fill it out, submit it, and then it would show it, and they go back here. Then I said, well, you know what? This page is good at showing, you know, what's remaining. This page is not so good at showing what's been collected. So how about we edit these galleries a little bit, and let's put at the top of each of these another little box that says, me and my size, let's use a text box because that way I won't go crazy with the size here. Up here, right, and I might use white text here, but you can keep seeing why I prefer pencil and paper. So I'm going to just say donations received, and then there's a dollar amount here, which in this case would be 500. And then I might even include the remaining, which would be the same number I have over there, right? So now on the screen, they can see all the causes. They can kind of, from a first glance, tell which ones are received. Now I might, if the donation target was 500, let's say the donation target was 500, and now there's 0 remaining, I might actually make this one green or something so that they don't have to see the ones that are already there, right? That are already, we already have that in there. So this one might have a background of green, right? So, and again, in this case, when I show this to those people who are potential users, I might just simply ask them, what do you think the different colors mean, right? Or, and of course, we have the accessibility checker now, so you can make sure these colors have enough contrast, right? Which will make it way better than this sketch that I'm doing in PowerPoint. But you might ask them, what do you think that, why do you think the first one is green? Or why do you think, you know, ask them questions, but don't give them answers. Right. And I see that people are using Balsamic, and I have used it before. Again, my only recommendation, all of those tools are good. Sketch is good. Balsamic is good. All these tools are really great to use. The key is, are you good at using them? Use them. If they distract you because you're not good at using them, don't use them. Use paper and pen. The goal with sketching is to be completely without distraction. Don't be distracted by technology, and don't be distracted about your wishes and your dreams. You're not even thinking to yourself, wow, can I do that in Power Apps? You're not really thinking that. You're just trying to get the wish and the dream out when you sketch. And then this sketch sits next to you as you build your app. It sits next to you on your desk as you build your app. When you save your app and go to lunch and you come back, you have notations on this as to what you have next to do. The other thing I will do with this piece of paper, because I will print this out and share it with people over coffee, at lunch, wherever I can get a set of eyes on this picture, I will flip the paper over and start taking feedback notes on the back. And so having the sketch and the feedback notes on the back, or if you're using technology, you can add comments. That's very handy as you build your app. I find that when I use technology, though, I need to have an environment where I have two screens, because I really just want to be able to glance over at my sketch and my notes. All right, so now that we have a sketch, you're going to make believe that I am have that next to me in my office here as I do this app. Again, I chose to use the destination list primarily because I get that edit screen like out of the box. But I will show you how we could do it manually as well. In this case, though, in our sketch, the browse gallery is not the destination list. It's actually the list of causes. So let me show you how I adjust that. So we are at the half mark. We're halfway mark. I hope I don't get cut off. But if I do, we will have a part 2 on this next week. All right. If we get cut off, we will have part 2 next week. All right. So I need to add the parent data source, because when Power Apps built this, it only gave me the employee contributions. So I'm going to go ahead and add the parent. So remember, you can always add data sources at any time, right? So I challenge you to use more than one data source in your next project. I do also recommend, though, that you stay beneath 30. All right, too many data sources can be just as bad as not enough. All right, so now I'm going to go find SharePoint. And yes, I do have a lot of connections. Don't talk bad about me. Those of you judgmental. It has a lot to do with I do a lot of demos. And so I have to show people how to do stuff, which you've already done. But that's the way it goes. So I'm going to choose my site, which is a recent site. If I didn't have the site in the recent sites, you would paste the URL. So you would just go back to your SharePoint site and get the URL of the site. You don't need the list, just the root of the site. And then after you do that, you go back to Power Apps and you paste it right in there. All right. Since it was a commonly used site of mine, I could just copy it over. I could just select the one that was there already. So I'm going to choose employee contributions is already in here because I started with that. Be careful, guys. Here's a big red flag. If you add a data connection twice, you need to be careful, because if you make formulas against both of them, you're going to have failures. So kind of keep track of what data connections you have already added. And so I'm going to choose the giving donations, which is my parent list. Now, the way to avoid having two data sources the same is just kind of take a minute and check your data sources after you've added that you don't have any with an _1. That's bad. Okay, _1 means that some of your formulas might refer to one and some of your formulas might refer to other one, and that would not be fun to troubleshoot. Okay, so remove any extras if you make a mistake and add them, and only use ones without the _1. Okay, which means that's the first instance of that list that has been added to your app. Okay, so now a couple of things on this screen that we're going to change. So I'm actually going to take a peek at our new themes real quick and give this some color. Sometimes I will design along the way. It depends, Sometimes when it comes to new clients, I will, because I want them to gain confidence during that first POC. But yeah, I'll do a little bit of design, and the themes kind of really help. You can just pick something you like and go from there, right? So one way of doing it. We said that we're going to put causes up here, right? So we're going to put causes. We could also put charities. So you can change your mind. So just because you sketch something doesn't mean it's locked down in stone. Change your mind along the way. That's fine. Just make notes. Make sure that the notes are on the back of those sketches or in your data, because you'll want to transfer that knowledge. Okay, somebody's ringing the bell. We're just going to ignore that bell. All right, so now I'm going to click on this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to connect this to the right data source, right? Right now it's connected to the contributions, but we want them to be able to see the causes here. So all I'm going to do is just change. Power Apps does such a nice job of giving me ability to sort and to search when I build from apps. I really love that. And here's something I did when I first started. I built apps, and then I would copy and paste these to my OneNote and study them, like get to know what their value was. And that was like a great way of being able to help me later on build my formula knowledge. So I'm going to change this to the giving donations, which is the parent list. All right, and basically I'm okay with it sorting by title. You most definitely could sort by something else. Remember that the first title is what it's searching. The second one is what it's sorting by, right? So I could sort by title. I could change this to created, right? If I wanted to sort by date. I don't have to keep this if statement here. It just enables me to toggle the search as ascending, descending. If I'm sure I always want it descending, I can just delete all this and just leave the word descending, right? You can simplify when you understand the formulas. And that's why I say get used to copying formulas that we make for you and understanding why we did it, like kind of hold us accountable to explain why did you make it like that, right? So now I have my charities here, and it looks like it gave me the ID and the amount. That was nice of it. So let's fix this up a little bit. So you know that I do like to use a lot of the template stories here, template fill, template padding, template size. I'm going to go ahead and make the template fill white. And then I'm going to give it some padding, which will make this look more like a card. And then I want to kind of focus on the title. So I might choose to give it a complementary color. Do not go crazy with colors, but sometimes it can help. Just make sure that your accessibility checker believes that you have enough contrast between your colors. This accessibility checker over here will let you know when things need to be adjusted for accessibility. And right now it's not complaining about that color, right? You can also use any natural tools that you have for checking that, all right? Okay, now I have my little highlight on my thing. What did we say we wanted here? We wanted the target amount. We didn't even want the ID. And, you know, it's like 6 in one hand, half a dozen in another, if I will make this invisible instead of removing it. Now, sometimes the only reason I'll make an ID number invisible is because I might want to use it in testing. So I'll put it somewhere where nobody will see it and kind of hide it for testing later on. I can always turn it back on. Now, when we build these for you, these are all related as far as the X and the Y axis. So to get that 400 back up there, all you really have to do is select it and drag it back up, and it will cancel out the formula that relates it to the ID, right? So, and if you didn't get that, I will put a link below all about how we align things easily by using X, Y coordinates and making things relative to one another. So Sandy indicates here, I noticed the auto app generation improved recently, not defaulting to the layout with image. Putting the default fields in the right place is better. Making the search on title, thanks for that. You are so welcome. There are so many people that got involved in that, so I will let them know you gave that feedback. I love when you guys give me feedback like that I can share with the team. So we are going to move some stuff down here as well. And the reason is, remember, we want to put the remaining and stuff up here. So I'm making some room for that. I don't like this icon, so I'm not going to use it. And I guess I shouldn't say I don't like it. In this case, I don't want that icon, so I'm not going to use it. Then I'm going to kind of make my target a little bigger, and I'm going to indicate what this is. So I don't know if you can recognize that. You can prefix any of these fields with text in quotes. So in this case, I'm just going to put the word target with a semicolon and a space, and the ampersand, which gives me the space, which concatenates, or puts together the prefix and the dynamic value. And then I also want to format this as a number. So I'm just going to do text, get behind here. I'm wrapping this around what's called a text function. And all the functions will have links in the description that I've used. And this enables me to use an Excel custom number format in order to make it look like a number. Now, I have several degrees of bolding, underscoring, and all this other stuff up here that are just like PowerPoint. And I really like taking advantage of these things to change the weight of things. And I guess, maybe in my first proof of concept, I'll get some feedback from people as to whether they think that the cause should be bold or whether the target should be more relevant. But you can use the combination of these different choices here to give things more weight, right? I will share with you all of our design tips as well. We've done a lot of work in giving you some advice on how to lay out things so that they're easy for your users to read. Okay, so now here's the interesting thing. We don't actually want a detail screen in this case. We don't need it, so I'm actually going to delete it. There's no sin in deleting things, right? You may do that without having to go to confession. No problem. So when you don't need something, take it away. But I like to start with more than what I need and go down than starting with nothing and kind of like building from scratch. So whenever I don't have to reinvent the wheel, I don't. Okay. Now, this edit screen is still going to connect to the employee contributions page, right? But we need to change the connection, the item property here. And the reason is because at this point, and you can see that there's a red dot here, and it says, and I'll read it to you because it's tiny. It says expected a value compatible with data source. Now, if I open up my app checker, as long as I find myself to screen number 1, right, you'll notice that it kind of points out this error over here if I didn't want to read that tiny text over there. And not only can I read the error here, but I can also click this little chevron and learn more. So we're going to be incorporating more learn more stuff in the details of our checker. Notice it also brings me to the field where the error is. Wow, thank you, Power Apps, for doing that. I don't have to figure out where to go to fix this. So what it's saying when it says expected a value compatible with the data source is that the data source for this is employee contributions, but the data source for Browse Gallery 1 is something else. Uh-oh. So what we need to do there is we need to look up the item. And so the reason why I'm not even going to worry about this at all is because in our scenario, they will never be editing these things. But I wanted to show you, right? In this case, I would have to use a lookup for finding out which item this is, right? And the lookup would have to use the ID of the gallery in the beginning, right? And so we'll talk about that. We will get a chance to talk about that lookup shortly. But I just wanted to point out that these cannot have separate data sources. They don't agree. So it says compatibility is necessary. You're not talking to the same data, so I don't like it, right? So we would have to look up the item property if we wanted to do edits. But again, we don't plan to do any edits, so I can just remove the formula and set the default mode to new. And now I'm good. All right. So now this particular page is called Edit Screen 1. So I'm going to go back to my gallery and put an icon here to get there. Now, in this particular case, you can use any icon that you like to add a contribution. You might even that might be in your design package. You took a little bit of time and you found some icons that look like money, or you found something interesting. I'm going to keep this really simple, right? Because here I am on Google Hangouts, not even knowing if it's going to let me keep talking. And I'm going to change this to add a donation. Sometimes I find that simple can be the best thing in the world for the end user who has to understand what to do next, right? So I could just make this particular label a clickable situation, and then bold it or give it a different color or something to make you draw your attention to it. But that is what they'll click on. All right. So don't assume you need to use buttons. All right. I'm going to use a button this time just because I know many of you want to use a button. Notice that when I clicked that button, it came to the top of the screen. That's bad news, because if we look at the hierarchy over here, it's in front of my gallery. We layer in Power Apps very similar to how you layer in PowerPoint. So button is on top of everything, and that's why it's at the top of this hierarchy here. That's not where I want it. I want it in here so that when I click on the button for this thing, it goes to the right page, right? So I'm going to make sure I select my gallery, hit that pencil icon, and I'm inside that template. Now when I hit button, it goes into the template for every row. Isn't that cool? So kind of important to pay attention to where you are when you insert things, right? Because it makes a big difference. In this case, I want them to be able to click a button that enables us to get the information of which one they selected, right? I'm going to keep the font the same. I normally change these, but I'm not going to today. Veronica told us if you're doing a phone app, no smaller than 14 points. Nothing on the screen should be smaller than 14 points if you'd like people of my age to be able to read them when they're looking at their phone. So don't make things tiny, even though here you are zoomed into this screen. All right, I'm going to just type here, or I can go to the text property and type add donation. Normally you can type right on the button as well. I had a little resistance there, so I moved on. So you have that choice. You can also do it over here on the right. We made it so that you can put most of your properties over here. Since I've added a new item to this app that doesn't have a name, I'll also take a minute to name it. So I'm going to call this button Select Cause. Okay, so it's just to select the cause, right? What do I want this button to do? I want it to go and navigate to the edit screen. And so I can use the action menu to choose edit screen. And what I love about that is that even if I don't know how to write a formula, it writes it for me. So if I go check the on select statement here, on select is what you use. It's just like an on click event, right? So we're doing on select, and it's going to navigate to edit screen 1, and it's going to have a transition of fade. But both of these are available when you choose this here. It lets you choose the screen and the transition. I don't know how many of you are using transitions, and then it'll fill out the formula for you, which is so nice. All right. Depending on whether you're using your form for both edits and new, in this case, remember we set the new form to default to new form mode. But if you wanted to do both, the thing you'd want to put in front of your navigate is new form, edit form 1. And what this is saying is when you navigate to that page, I want you to force the form to be in new form mode. Okay, and let me show you what you may have seen when that's not the case. So if I put this in edit mode right now and I play or preview this app, it says no item to display because it's in edit mode. But if I want to see the fields so that I can type, where was I? Oops, edit form 1. I'm going to change the mode to new. And now when I sample this, I can see all the fields. So think about that when you're building your apps. You know, sometimes you have to decide, do I want to default it to edit? If you do, that's fine. You need an item property. So you need to tell it which item. How does it identify which item it's editing? And you also need to force it to be in new mode when you want to add a new item. Now, in this particular case, I am actually getting rid of all of these. I don't need any of them. So I'm not going to delete them because I might want them back later. I'm just going to turn them to invisible. So sometimes I will keep things hanging around in case I change my mind later. It doesn't hurt to just hide them. They don't hurt anything. I'm going to just test this screen. I should be able to search by the charity. So I think we're using starts with. So I'm going to do S, and there's Space Force. I could also have done better, and that would have been better beds for us, okay? If you want the in operator, you can definitely use it as long as you can estimate that your list will not exceed delegation limitations. If this is going to have, as we predicted, 300 items, you can most definitely change that to an in function. So basically, in that case, what I would do is in the items property of this gallery, instead of starts with here, I would use title, search bot text in title, which is in. It's an operator, and I don't need the starts with function. And let's see if we can just do that, right? Okay, I'll do text in title. Okay, and you can check that you've picked the right thing. Okay, I have a little problem here, and I think it's because I need to add the search, and I didn't use that. But I will actually, what I will do for you is I will put the in statement in there because I've done it all the time. I just probably because of YouTubeitis, something's missing in my brain. That's okay. I'll add it to the description so you can do it. All right. So now that we basically have tested this screen, we'll add the other stuff in a minute. I want to first get our edit screen going. So I'm going to go back to the edit screen here. And from the edit screen, I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to set this cause ID's default value. I can set it here to a default value so that it picks up that gallery 1 situation as a default, or I could patch this, right? And so a couple of ways to do that. So what I did for you is in the deck, because this can be a little challenging, setting defaults for lookups and choice lists really requires that you send 2 values to, and what we did recently is Carlos, who is one of our awesome engineers, put together a great blog that I like to share with everybody on how to set default values for your forms. In this case, because this form is connected to a different data source, I want to set the default value on the lookup so that when it submits, we submit to the right. That we make a relationship between the donation and the cause. And so he goes into exactly how to do that. I really like that he did this for us so that we have no problem, right? So I will put the link to this blog, and what I can do right here is I can just copy, right? And that's probably what you'll do too, right? And I'll take that into my app, and I can go into this field here. Now, this field, what's interesting about this field is that when you're talking about something with more than one value, you're talking about something that is a table, or it's more than one thing. So that's the challenge with this. So I'm going to select the actual card, and on the card, I'm going to look at the default value. I also need to unlock this. And again, did I close the blog? He explains this so that you don't forget what you have to do. You can just follow his instructions here. Notice that he tells you what to do, and then he tells you how to do it. So you shouldn't have any problem setting this up. Okay, please check out this blog. If you're using SharePoint, it's a great blog. And I think one of the things I like about the section, it also includes person columns. I don't know if you've ever wanted to set a default persons column. He actually tells you step by step how to use the claims in SharePoint Online to assign the right claim that will give you your default value, which I thought was, wow, that's that easy. I was really, really very impressed on this. And so there's some things he points out. So I suggest you do a little bit of reading as you work through this. Don't just scan for the actual formulas, but actually kind of read through what he's doing so that you understand what he's doing when he's doing this. Okay, so I'm going to unlock this and I'm going to paste what Carlos typed in there. And the form mode is always going to be new, but I'm going to change this back to the name of my field. Let me just make sure. I have notes on this too. Name of my field, and I can reset it. And I'll tell you why I'm hesitating. It's because when I actually did this to test it, I did it with a patch to show you the hardest way. And so I didn't have to sit here and figure this out live in front of you, which I might still not do. But I'm going to show you where, two things that I do when I'm working on this is I actually open up my OneNote and I actually make a complete set of notes as I'm doing that quick POC. And these notes help me to do a better job of like not playing around with formulas, right? So I'll play around with it until I figure it out, and then I actually put it in there. Because although you see us when we do these demos, we go click, 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 click. In real life, we usually do a little bit of playing around as well, trying to make sure that we get the right thing in there. And so I will take these notes. Now, I actually will do this as a patch today as well, because I only want 2 fields. I don't want this, and I don't want to have to worry about attachments. And I have a very simple design. So I actually might go ahead and continue to patch this because I like it better in this case. But we can definitely include in the PowerPoint exactly how you can handle it from the forms point of view, okay? And I will change this to the field names. All right, so this is going to be a patch statement instead of a submit form. And what's important here is that you name your fields the same way I'm going to name my fields. And you can see this to value that I'm putting in here, which I would use for that default as well. So it's basically been figured out in advance. But these 2 fields are not there yet, which is why you see an error. Okay, and it's patching to that list. And we'll go through this in detail in the deck before we close this up as well. I'm going to insert, not a label, I'm going to insert a text input box. I'm actually going to do both, a label and an input box. And again, and I think, you know, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on look and feel for this one, just because we're on video, but I do kind of maybe spend a little bit time on making sure that everything is lined up the way I want. You know, I will align them relatively to each other. But even more important than aligning them and making sure that they are relative to each other, I make sure I rename every control that I place on the screen. And the reason I do that is because when I'm using my formulas, right, I want to make sure that I know what I'm looking for, right? If I make these names too difficult for me to find, then it makes me harder for me to do my formulas. So I'm just going to call this text sponsor. And you'll notice that sometimes I use prefixes based on the type of control it is. These are text input fields, and that's why it's TXE. Donation. Now, donation is a number, so I want to show you a little trick about that too. And then I also use label prefix for my labels. Now, the one thing I want to show you on this is that this is helpful for search. When you use the same prefix all the time, you can now search for all your text fields just by going to the top and typing text. You can search for all your buttons by going to the top and doing that prefix. You can search for all your forms, you know, so how do you spell form? Oh, there wasn't a form there. So, and you can find all this stuff. And when you have a lot of screens, it's really helpful to be able to do a quick search and find all the forms or find all the buttons, because maybe you have to do a change across them and things like that. So really love getting in the habit of naming things properly. On this, I don't really want a default value in here. I'm just going to make it blank. And I'm going to make the default on this blank too. However, two things I want to think about on these, right? So part of building apps for people is recognizing where people can make mistakes or where people won't understand things, right? So wherever you can add additional assistance, like this is overkill because I already have a label that says sponsor, but you could technically avoid the label and maybe just have the hint text, right? But I actually use both because after they enter it the first time, they won't be able to see what it was that they entered later, you know. But think about giving your users some help, right? In each of your fields so that they're not kind of confused on what they're doing. Now, because Power Apps allows you to type in this text field anything, I might also set up some data validation. So I might add another label here, and I might call this label warning, LBL warning, and maybe I'll make this red. And then if this is not a number, I will have this pop up, right? So how do we check to see if that's a number? So I'm going to go into the on change of this. Okay, this is the hardest part of this presentation. So and the patch which we're going to do next. This is the hardest part, but it's not all that bad, right? I'm actually going to use a variable to determine whether or not the entry of that field is a number. And I'm going to be able to use our friendly isNumber function, isNumeric function, kind of pretty easy to find, right? And then in that function, what I'm going to do is put the value, because this is well, let's just put the box, text donation dot text. And in a way, do want to put a number. So right now, it's not numeric because it's blank. So on change, if is blank, sorry, not is blank. So I'm kind of saying if it's not blank, if I need to do the whole thing, text donation dot text, and yes, I could have copied and pasted this from my OneNote. Text donation dot text. I'm going to put the formula in front of there too. So if this not is blank, so we have an is blank function that can tell you if something is blank. I'm having a typo issue here. So actually what I'm evaluating there is if text donation text is blank, if it's true, or I'm sorry, I want to do an or here. Or is numeric text donation text. So actually I'm saying if it's is numeric or not is numeric, then I want to update a context variable called show error, and I'm set that as true. Yes, I could do a global variable if I want to, not an issue. So let's check my formula again and catch me if I'm wrong, because it happens to all of us. So don't ever feel bad when you have to do a formula a couple of times. If is blank, text donation dot text, or is not numeric, text donation dot text. So actually, you know what? Not blank. So I want to make sure it's not blank and it's not numeric. So I'm going to do and here. If it's neither blank nor numeric, then I want you to set this show error to true. And then on this guy, which I'm going to type some text into right here, only numeric values are allowed. Again, I speak in the language of my consumer, so think about them, right? If they're people who are building tunnels that never heard the word numeric, don't get fancy. Only numbers are allowed, right? And then what I want to do to the visible property of this is set it to be true only when show error is true. So if this is 156, when I tab out of it, we don't have an error. But if I put the letter A in here and I tab out of it, the error message appears. I really like doing this because of our text. All of these boxes are text input boxes. The only thing that kind of validates itself is a date input box. So I will kind of do this because otherwise when they submit, if they put something wrong in here, they will get a nasty server-side error message. And I don't want my users to experience that. So I don't let them see it, right? So by doing some validation in advance. Okay, and I think, did I turn it back? So after I fix it, I have to kind of turn it back to false, right? So, or find a way to turn this off. So that's just a thought to say. Now here, what is going on here? What is going on here? Oh, this one needs to be called text sponsor donation. I forgot to name it. Text. Instead of text donation, it should be text sponsor donation. That's just what I named it originally. I would either have to change it here or change it there so that we don't have any errors in our patch statement. Let's check that button again. Now that's gone. Let's look at the patch really closely. So what we're doing, and again, you'll have a link to this, to these instructions in the description or in the post, because I will post this on our community. You first have to tell it what the source is. Now, if you ever wonder, what are the parameters for these functions? Look up, guys. Right here, we try our best to tell you what to type. So if you get right behind that paren, it'll say source. If you get after this one, it'll tell you, okay, we're waiting for the record now. What it means by record is which records do you want me to update, right? And we're going to just do this as a new thing. It's not really an update. It's a new thing. So we just have to do defaults employee contributions. And then what do we want to actually update? We're going to put a title of the column followed by a colon for every column that we want to update. And then we put the value to the right. Okay. And you can see that I've done that. I want to update the title column. Make sure, guys, and all of you are saying, Audrey, we know what you're going to say. Don't even bother wasting your time saying it. But make sure you update all of your required fields. Because guess what? They're going to get an error message if you don't submit all the required fields. So run back to your SharePoint list and go double check in there that you don't have any required fields in the list that you're submitting to. Just go into your list settings and then go take a peek. You don't have any required fields. It kind of shows up right here, right? So really important, because if you patch and you don't have the required fields, they're going to get an error message that they probably won't understand. And it looks like invalid something or other. It's not friendly. Okay, so I have that done. Now, the cause one is the hard one, because this is the lookup field on SharePoint. And remember, I said it has two values. It has an ID number and a value. Okay, now I want you to check out what Carlos did in his blog, which is slightly different and a little bit more condensed than what I've done. But this is the one I've always been doing, and so it still works, so I keep doing it. But check out Carlos's method. Either one work. And so basically, this is something you kind of have to just remember. So this is in my OneNote in the section called Popular Formulas Not to Forget. And then it's in there. It's a slightly different when it comes to people. I believe it has something to do with, people properties or profiles or something. It doesn't say the same thing. And then what I'm doing is passing the ID. Now, remember, the gallery in the first screen is the parent list. So all I need from it is the ID. And then the value that is going to be the actual, what's going to be, what's the word, is the name of the cause. And so that's the title in the gallery. So as long as I pass those two things, I'm good. The other thing I want to point out to you, this is the mistake that I make all the time, is I forget these squigglies. these squigglies, like I've decided to be good friends with them and not to be offended by them, but don't forget them. So you need those squigglies to be around all of those parameters for the lookup, as well as around the actual all the fields that you're updating. So it's like the cause has a nested value. Okay. Yes, I chose to do this because it's a little bit harder, because I want you to know how this stuff really works behind the scenes, and you can see how to do it manually. All right. It's actually easier when you're doing it the other way. Now, when I submit this, I actually want to, we had a reset form, but we had a form before. We don't have a form anymore. So basically, this can just navigate back to the first screen. That's good enough. But this guy, I do want it to reset my fields, right? So after you patch, I want you to literally reset those fields so that they're blank again. So basically, you just use the reset function and you put the name of the field inside of the reset function. And I'm going to do that for any field that I want to reset. Now, of course, if I had a lot of fields on this screen, I might be doing this differently. I might even use the concurrent function. I don't know how many of you have started using concurrent, but you can do things concurrently to save the number of posts to the server. So let me just reinsert those two fields. Notice that I pick it or I tab when I see it. All right, so now that resets them. So actually, I'm going to leave this here, but I'm actually going to take this and put it into a button as well. And the reason is, sorry, I just had a little blurb here. Okay. The reason I'm doing that is because some people don't notice that thing at the top. They don't get it. So I actually put a button at the bottom sometime. But if you do that, you might want to hide this, like after they click the button, so that they don't click them both, right? But so it might be best to use one or the other. I find the buttons get understood faster than the checkbox unless they have experience with Power Apps. Okay, but I'm going to put it under this button click here. So I'm just going to use the on select. Remember, on select, anytime you want it to do something, when you tap on something, go ahead and do an on select. All right. I might also refresh my data. You can actually do a refresh of either of your data sources or both of them in case you want to show that change right away on this screen, which we will do because we want that table on the bottom, which is the last thing I will do when I have time. All right, so now I've refreshed the data, so it's going to be patched, then the fields are going to be submitted, and then the data will be refreshed. Now down here, I'm going to insert another gallery, which is basically going to show the contributions for that cause. So I'm going to attach it to the contributions list, move it down. I'm going to filter it though, because I don't want all the contributions. I only want it for this cause. So I'm going to filter the employee contributions, where the cause, that you have the cause column. When I click it, it's a lookup, remember? So I get to choose ID or value. I love ID because that's unique, right? ID equals browse gallery 1, selected ID. So I'm matching the ID of the lookup to the ID of the parent in order to get back only the contributions that relate to that cause and no other cause. Did I pick a blank gallery? Probably did. Yeah. So this happens to be the contributions. Let's also put that up here, like which contribution is this? This is browse gallery 1, selected title. So you can use these titles. This is my couch. And so you can see that Martin and Gina, those of you that recognize who these people are, put it in the chat. Martin and Gina, Pam and Shanae, they have contributed. I'm going to change the ID of this to the donation amount. The contribution amount. And I will also format this as text. So, I mean, as dollars, the same way we did the other one. And I'm going to actually make this look more like a table. So I'm going to take this over here and just, did you know that you can align like you can in PowerPoint? You can just use align top, align left, align middle. You can do all that kind of stuff just like you do with anything else. You know, you can even do send to back, send to front. All of these tools up here that you have with PowerPoint, you also have with Power Apps. And when you move things around down here, I don't know if you notice that as well, as you move them, we give you little indicators of whether you're aligned. So just look closely at those purple little lines and you can see if you're well aligned. I don't need the chevron because I'm not going to choose anything else. So you will notice that I do have a delegation warning, but we're not worried about it because we already talked about that during our hypotheses and our data selection. We don't need to talk about it anymore. Okay? So now I'm going to make it look like a table. So I'm just going to put a label up here. Bring it down a little closer. And this is going to be my header for this row. So this is sponsor. Give yourself white space, guys. Don't get too close to the left. And I will actually send you a whole bunch of information about design best practices. I'm going to, this is my label sponsor. So rename label sponsor. I'm going to, oops, I already used it. So don't you love how we help you not give the label the same? Label header sponsor. Now I can find all my headers at the same time. And my gallery, I'm going to call this gallery donations. All right. Now I'm going to swap this so that it has the same background as this button. So I'm going to do a fill on this to match the button. Did we rename the button? Look, we didn't. But it's okay. I want to show you something about that. So I'm going to do button 3 fill so that the heading has the same fill as the button. And if you notice, if I change button 3's name now, because maybe Audrey remembered at the last minute, button submit, right? It will go ahead and change it in your formulas. So when you change the names of things after you've done something, it will go ahead and change it. Now I can do relative for the text color as well, but just for the sake of time, I'm just going to copy and paste this guy. Usually what I will do in every case is get something exactly the way I want it. Like if I have a lot of things of it to do, and then copy and paste that. I don't try and do one thing at a time. I try to leverage whatever I can several times, right? And what you can see that I'm doing here is I'm literally making table headers. And again, I can use my align to align it top and so forth until I get it where I want it to be. I want to make sure that this is above my gallery, you know, that it's not in the way. And stuff like that. All right. Now this one should say label header amount or donation, and it should also say donation. Okay. Now, what if I want to sum all the donations being done so far? This is one thing I love to watch. One of our partners, Anton, I think he's on the call. He loves to do this, and I do too. You kind of like drag your mouth with it pushed down, just like you do in PowerPoint, and you can select more than one thing. Isn't that cool? It's very helpful sometimes, right? So let's say I want to put a total of all of these donations in here. So again, I've added a label. Every time you add something, it kind of goes to the top of the screen. So people who zoom in like me will notice that they have to kind of scroll back up. All right. Now I'm just going to say total remaining, right? So this one has to be counting these, summing these, and then subtracting it from the amount, the target. The hardest thing, hardest formula is this one. But guess what, how I did that? So I'm starting with this one because it's a little bit less than the one in the first page that we have to do. So I'm going to just paste this here, and then I'll talk to you about it. Right. So basically, I am summing. I'm going to start right here. I am summing the employee contributions table based on where the ID matches the cause that has been selected. So very similar to what we did earlier. That's what's happening right here. I'm summing it. And then I'm going back to the reference I have in the gallery and finding out what was the amount. And I'm literally just subtracting the sum from the amount. And then I'm formatting it as a number and adding the text remaining to be collected. And that's how easy it is to create like a relationship between things so that you can display data across different data sources as they relate to one another, right? And this is where our apps become very rich, because why are they rich? Not because we're good at making apps, but because we're giving people more information than they're used to being able to get on that piece of paper. We'll keep remembering our hypotheses, right? They couldn't tell how much was to be remaining from that piece of paper, right? Now they can tell, okay, we still need some more money for Audrey's couch. So they can tell to do that. So just to test this, let's contribute to the couch. So I'm going to go ahead and make Anton the person who's going to contribute to my couch. He's a celebrity in our world. And then I'm going to have him donate a whole whopping $4.50. And we're going to submit that. Now, in the submit, you'll notice the ants moving. I've patched the data. I also reset the fields, and I also refresh the data so that the table shows it here as well. Now, again, if I had more time, I would spend a little bit of time on this gallery so that it didn't take up as much space on the screen. It's very easy to change the size of things. I might set these to align top of my gallery and things like that so that it takes up less space. So you'll think about that. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that today. So basically the way this works now is if I'm here, I can go ahead and add donation. Well, did I configure it? I thought I did. Let's see. Oh, we got a little error. Let's see what our little error is. New form. Oh, we don't have a form. Okay, I was telling you that if you had a form, you had to do new form. But we don't have a form, so we don't have to do new form. We just place those labels there. And now let's have Sandy contribute something to my couch. Sandy, gotta remember your last name, Sandy. Right? I hope that's your right last name. And then let's have Sandy just contribute $10, right? These guys aren't cheap. They just realize my couch ain't important, right? So, and it works. It's not a problem. And so we are running out of time, but let's see if we can do the last piece of this, which is basically just to add at the top here the label that has the remaining. And I do have that in the PowerPoint as well as on my OneNote. Again, that was all work that I did when I did my proof of concept. I will check all my warnings before this is over too. So I'm going to use my OneNote and just go in here. Now this one is probably the longest formula, but it's just building on what we did before, really. It's just same thing we did above the gallery is what we're doing here. We're doing an if statement. So basically what we're saying here is really about, why are we having a problem here? I can't use this item here. So this is a good point. So I can't use this item here in the same way because now I'm at the parent, right? So I want to, this is interesting. I might have to change this a little bit. Trying to figure out where I went wrong here. So we're in the employee contributions where the cause ID equals this item. We have a little bit of a problem here that I didn't expect. So I got to back up so that we're not lost here. And we'll look at that backup to see what I may have done. So here's the thing about taking notes. Sometimes you take notes, and you can also see my original version of this, so you can see how I kind of changed the look and feel. Sometimes when you take notes, you forget something or you'll add something. There's no reason why this item should not work there. So there's something I'm missing. But let's look at it finished so you can see. Just give it a second to load. That circle of hope that I love to see is spinning. All right. Now I'm just waiting for it to load the data. And then we're going to look at this right here, which is what we were just doing. Let's look at this. I don't see any difference. And guys, things like this will happen sometime where you'll do a formula and then you'll try and do it again. And it's like, okay, I'm doing the same thing. Don't get frustrated. Sometimes it'll take a simple thing like save it, close your file, reopen it. Could be the session got extended too long. It could be, you know, maybe there was a whole bunch of calls at a certain time. I don't get upset. I just kind of close it, reopen it, because I take good notes and I kind of keep track of what works and what doesn't work. And then I can tell when, okay, is there a problem with Power Apps? Like yesterday, we had a little bit of a problem with Power Apps. So it's not me that's doing saving wrong. It's the problem that we had. So I like to be very open with you guys to let you know that things don't happen perfectly all the time. But when they happen, you just stay calm, save it, reopen it, try it again, and it probably will fix itself. I hope that you enjoyed building this app with me today. I know personally I had a lot of fun. I'll show you the finished app with my little touches up. I actually did use text instead. I put it in front of users and it seemed like they liked the text better. That's why I did that. And I often ask a lot of people to help me, right? This is the exact same data, so it's just a different app connected to the same data. You can see that it works. Let's have the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air give me some money, right? Let's have him contribute a whole 1,000 because, you know, he is an actor. So right now there's 3,930. I can patch submit, and now I can see there's only 2,000 needed. My table shows me everything. If I go back, I can see the ones that, you know, need to collect more money. Now, I also put an if-then statement in there that if you meet the target, so let's meet the target somewhere. So we need to get 20 more on this one. So for this charity R Us, I'm going to go ahead and include, I don't know, who do we want to include? Let's just do Michael Douglas. Let's hope I can spell Michael Douglas. I think he's a charitable person, right? And so we need 20,000. So I'm going to go ahead and do 20,000. And now we don't have any more money to do. So you see that that one does not have any remaining because we got it. Yay! And we can definitely color that to show that it's remaining. Guys, was this helpful? Kind of put any thoughts you have in the comments. If you'd like me to do these app builds with you more often, let me know. Go to the community, though, to let me know. Go to the community and kind of post that you want more videos doing apps. If you want to be one of the people that I focus on and I actually interview you and you show us how you built your app, please let me know. You can private message me on the community or you can email me at audrie@microsoft.com. Let me know if this was helpful, guys. I'm looking at the chat now to make sure you guys are still with me. Remember that you will get access to my notes and to the PowerPoint. So as far as the PowerPoint goes, it has several slides of notes. So default choice lookups with the link to that blog. Don't forget about using themes, the sketch. It also has all of the notes you saw me pulling out of my OneNote. I'll make sure that they're in there as well. There you go. Those are all my notes. And I will post this on the community. So to see the video, come to YouTube, but to get the notes, you got to go into the community and go to the webinar gallery. You guys, you're the best. You know what I'm going to say. You get it from the community, Bina. The link will be under this video so that you can get the PowerPoint. But you got to go to the community to get the PowerPoint. And I'm so glad you were here, Bina. I didn't notice you earlier. Great to see all of you. And I hope to talk to you soon. Happy power apping. Okay, get value out of this tool. This is worth money. Okay, Saves time, saves money, earns money. Do it. All right. Have a great whatever you do, and I'll be talking to you soon.